Like many early first-party Nintendo games, it took me a little while to take interest in them, and Metroid Prime is no exception. Around the time that most of these games were hot, I was still in my early stages of gaming, and despite owning a GameCube, the Sonic games were where it was at for me. Later on, however, I started to dive deeper into Nintendo territory, and the rest is history. I liked Metroid Prime so much when I originally played it that, knowing me, I wanted a Samus figure or some kind of physical representation of that game. Seeing as the only Samus figure at the time was this one, and it cost a ton of money, I took to my sculpting skills and made my own. From then on, it was like with most Nintendo characters, and I kept improving the sculpt and my skills over the years until the result stands at a dinosaur of a first attempt and a much improved and refined grasp of the character in more recent times. Hey guys, it's LSuperSonicQ, and today we'll be taking a look at the evolution of my Samus clay model. This is the first Samus ever, and one that I often refer to as the dinosaur of all my Samus models because not only was it sculpted a long time ago, but it is also very disproportional and very clunky. Many of the details are wrong, and I even ran out of the dark orange clay I was originally using and needed to substitute with a lighter orange. This model is very large for its time period, and I often say that a large model means a good model because I have more confidence about a character, so I sculpt them on a larger scale. That's not the case here though, as Samus turned out simply so large because I was unable to successfully translate the large portions of her Varia suit into a reduced size, and she also doesn't stand up on her own. For some odd reason, I get the feeling that I used that tiny picture icon on the Nintendo Monopoly board as reference when sculpting this. I'm not sure if that's exactly true, considering I must have been stupid to not use the game box which I owned, and Nintendo Monopoly might not have even been around when I started using artwork, but for some reason the Monopoly icon just sticks in my head. If there was ever a better evolution between one model and another, this would be it. This is literally my second Samus ever sculpted, and it definitely was not too long after the first one. Despite that, the level of improvement to this model is increasingly larger. First of all, you'll notice that the size is greatly reduced, leaving for a much more accurate proportion, and an overall better looking model. Originally, she didn't stand by herself, so I added this small stand later on, which doesn't distract from the model at all. Detail is noticeably lacking on this one, however, I think I would prefer this look over any inaccurate detail. I most likely left the sculpture seemingly so incomplete because I wasn't actively or frequently enough using artwork at the time, and I knew I probably wouldn't replicate it very well to begin with, artwork or not. It was in my best intentions to make the character as best as I could without focusing on the smaller details. The next Samus model I have to showcase was sculpted at least a couple years after the previous one and exhibits a very distinguishing quality about it: the pose. Originally being part of the 4-character Metroid Prime trophy series, I distinctly remember making an effort to try and set this model up in a pose similar to an early prototype image of First 4 Figures Samus statue, which, while not completely copying it, due to more likely than not my inability to keep the model in such a difficult stance. However, I decided to add my own bit of creativity and color this Samus suit, that of the Phazon suit, by far my favorite suit at the time when I was playing through Metroid Prime. Detail is mixed on this model, with there being more than on the gravity suit but not as much as the first Samus. Most of this was probably due to the fact that, like the previous model, I thought getting the sculpt and shapes down were more important than detail, and attempting to include such would most likely have smudged anyway, or not been seen by how this model was positioned, so I decided against going all out. However, the shape of her helmet is the most accurate and closest to what it will become out of the models we've seen so far. Now it's time for my favorite Samus clay model that I've ever sculpted, and a clay model in general that I would include in a top list of my all-time favorites. The term super real has come up many times before in my clay videos, so I'll explain a little bit of it. Due to the accuracy of character sculpts during a certain period in time, I would often consider this the best model of its era, hence being a super real character sculpt. This one is no exception to that rule. Considering the year this figure was sculpted in, I can't believe I was able to capture so much accuracy and detail in such a small figure. This whole model seems to glow, as if the colors I used were neon, and the green really looks like it does in the game, almost glowing in itself. Not to mention the black that I used adds such creativity to the model and really makes it stand out very boldly from most of the other models that sit on my clay table. The only bit of complaint I have with this model is that her arms look a little too long when looked at from certain angles, and I think it could have added a little more detail to her legs, but otherwise, it's a great looking model and definitely one that I would choose to define this era of clay in my sculpting history. This is probably the mother of all Samus clay models, and it's Samus in her Varia suit as seen in Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. In 2011, after noticing the intense and dramatic coloring of the Metroid Prime 2 Echoes box art, and while only having a little bit of clay left in my inventory, I decided to do something a little different and sculpt the Samus head, purposely used to experiment with paint shades and different ways to color a model. A little more than a year had passed, and the entire head had been pretty much painted as it appears here, and while looking at it in my prototype bag, I realized the shape of the head would be perfect to evolve into a bobblehead model. In late 2012, I got to work and sculpted an incredibly large body for the larger head, as bobbleheads are known for, making this model the second largest to date. The paint job is absolutely stellar, and definitely one of my favorite paint jobs for any clay model I've ever made. Additionally, extra support was added so this model could actually stand, and with that said, I think the evolution speaks for itself. This Samus is the most recent Samus sculpted to date, with it being made in October of 2014. Aside from the bobblehead or the evolution models I showcased in this video, the last actual model of Samus that I sculpted was probably around the same time as the super real one, if not earlier. Also, since this was a clay tutorial model, I had to really ensure quality, as other people would be viewing this and sculpting it along with me. As I said in the actual tutorial video, I was incredibly surprised with how well the model turned out, and it looked incredibly accurate to the Metroid Prime game cover I was using as reference. Her armor is the most noticeable quality in my opinion, with it looking very bulky and full, as well as highly proportional to the rest of her sculpt. If I had infinite time during a clay tutorial, I'm sure I could have got the sculpt even more accurate than this. However, that may be best suited for my own time, and perhaps in the future I will take up that endeavor and make a Samus even better than any of the ones seen here. Well guys, that does it for the evolution of my Samus clay model. Every model I showcase here, as well as about 95% of all Samus models I've sculpted, were based off of her Metroid Prime series designs. I haven't played a whole lot of Metroid games, but Prime 1 and 2 are some of the only ones I have, and I enjoyed those a whole lot. So I guess it's only expected that my enjoyment with that series is reflected in my sculptures. Anyway, I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and encourage you to continue doing so. I'll have more videos soon, but for now, I'm LSuperSonicQ, and until next time, Finn.